The island looked like paradise from the water. Green mountains. White beaches. Long, slow waves rolling in from the South Pacific like they had nowhere better to be. Any man seeing Guadalcanal for the first time might have thought it was beautiful. Those men were wrong. Beneath those trees was mud that swallowed boots whole. There were insects that carried disease. There were snakes, and heat, and a smell of rot that never left your clothes. And deep in the jungle, moving slowly and quietly through the dark green shadow, were thousands of soldiers who wanted to kill you. This is the story of one night in October 1942. One ridge. One river. 700 tired American Marines who were badly outnumbered, standing between a Japanese army and an airfield that could change the entire war. They did not run. They did not panic. They did something that took more courage than charging forward. They waited. The airfield was called Henderson Field, named after a Marine pilot who had died in battle a few months earlier. It sat on a flat piece of land near the coast of Guadalcanal, an island in the Solomon Islands chain. In the summer of 1942, that airfield was the most important piece of ground in the entire Pacific Ocean. Whoever controlled Henderson Field controlled the air above the surrounding sea. Whoever controlled the air controlled the ships moving through those waters. And whoever controlled those waters could either supply their troops on the island or starve them. The airfield was not just a strip of dirt and gravel. It was the key to a door, and both sides knew it. The Japanese had built it. American Marines had taken it from them in August 1942, landing on the beaches and fighting through the jungle in fierce battles that left both sides exhausted. By October, the Marines had held the airfield for 2 months. They were thin from poor food. Many were sick with malaria. Their uniforms were rotting on their bodies. Their boots were falling apart. But they held the line. The Japanese were not finished. Far from it. Back in Tokyo, military commanders had decided that Guadalcanal must be retaken at any cost. The airfield must be destroyed. The Marines must be thrown into the sea. A powerful army division called the Sendai Division was given the job. More than 2,000 soldiers, experienced fighters who had won battles across Asia, began moving into the jungle south of Henderson Field. Their orders were clear. Attack at night. Break through the Marine lines. Capture the airfield by morning. Some of those soldiers were so confident that they carried small Japanese flags in their pockets. Flags to plant on the airfield when it fell. Lieutenant Colonel Louis Puller knew they were coming. His men called him Chesty. He had earned that nickname over years of hard service in difficult places. He was not a tall man. He was not a man who used many words. But every Marine who served under him said the same thing: when things were at their worst, Puller seemed most calm. He needed that calm now. Puller commanded the 1st Battalion, 7th Marines. He had roughly 700 men to defend a long stretch of jungle perimeter along the Lunga River, south of the airfield. The river curved in a way that left certain sections of his line thin and difficult to support. Intelligence reports were telling him that a very large Japanese force was moving through the jungle toward exactly those sections. He did not call for his men to be moved to a safer position. There was no safer position. He did not ask for more time. There was no more time. Instead, Puller walked his line. He moved through the trees in the evening light, stepping over roots and ducking under branches, looking at the ground the way a carpenter looks at a piece of wood before cutting it. He studied where the river crossed in front of his positions. He looked at where the jungle opened up slightly, where the enemy would have to come out into the open to reach his wire. He thought about what a Japanese commander would see, and what that commander would not see. Then he went back and gave his orders. Every machine gun was moved into a position that could cover the open ground in front of the river crossing. The guns were set up so that their fields of fire crossed each other. This meant that any enemy soldier stepping into that open ground would face bullets coming from at least 2 directions at once. There was no angle of approach that avoided both. Barbed wire was strung quietly in the dark. More wire, farther out, in patterns designed to slow men down and hold them in the killing ground longer. Artillery coordinates were preset. The gunners registered their shells on the open crossing ground before nightfall, adjusting until they knew exactly where each round would land. In the dark, they would not need to see. They would only need to be called. Then Puller issued one final order. An order that would require more discipline from his men than almost anything he could have asked of them. Hold your fire until I say. Let them come. The rain started around midnight. It came down hard and fast, the way tropical rain does, turning the jungle floor into shallow rivers and filling the air with so much noise that a man could not hear anything more than a few feet away. The clouds covered the moon. The darkness was complete. In a headquarters tent behind the line, Puller sat with a radio and a telephone connected to the artillery positions. He was chewing on a pipe he never seemed to actually light. His eyes were steady. His voice, when he spoke to his officers, was quiet. Out in the jungle, his 700 men lay in their holes and waited. They could hear the Japanese coming. Not all at once. Not loudly. But the sounds were there if you knew what to listen for. The faint crack of a branch. Movement in water. The particular sound that a large group of men makes when they are trying to be silent but there are simply too many of them to be truly quiet. The Japanese Sendai Division was moving into position. Officers had told their men that the marine defenses were weak, that the perimeter was crumbling, that this night attack would succeed where previous attacks had failed. The soldiers believed this. They had every reason to believe it. They did not know what was waiting for them in the dark. The first Japanese soldiers reached the barbed wire in front of the marine positions. There was a pause. Some cutting. Movement. The wire slowed them, as it was designed to do, but it did not stop them. More soldiers pressed forward from behind. The column was long and deep, still moving out of the jungle, filling the open ground near the river crossing. This was the moment. Every Marine rifleman on that line had his finger near his trigger. Every machine gunner had his barrel pointed at darkness. The rain was loud. The enemy was close. And every one of those 700 men held himself still and did not fire. Because Puller had told them to wait. And then the signal came. The machine guns opened up all at once. The darkness turned white and orange. The sound was enormous, a rolling wall of noise that crashed through the rain and echoed off the jungle walls. Men who were there that night said later that the first few seconds felt unreal, like the world had suddenly changed into something different from what it had been a breath before. Illumination flares went up, fired by the artillery units behind the line. The flares hung in the air and burned bright white, and in that light the open ground between the jungle and the marine wire became visible. It was full of men. Hundreds of them, caught in the open, tangled in wire, pressing forward and backward at the same time as the men in front stopped and the men behind did not yet know why. Artillery shells began falling on the crossing ground. Preset coordinates. The gunners did not need to adjust. They simply fired, and the shells landed exactly where they were supposed to land, in the middle of the open area where the Japanese battalion had committed itself to the attack. The sound was continuous. There was no pause between the firing of the machine guns and the thunder of the artillery. It all ran together into one enormous sound that the Marines inside their positions felt more in their chests than heard with their ears. The Japanese did not break immediately. That is important to understand. These were experienced, courageous soldiers following orders from officers who believed in the plan. Wave after wave pressed forward. Officers shouted for their men to advance. Some of them reached the wire and cut through it. A few reached the outer edges of the Marine positions. The fighting in those moments was very close, very serious, and very dangerous. Puller was on the telephone throughout. Calling coordinates. Adjusting fire. Listening to reports from his company commanders and making decisions in seconds. At one point during the heaviest fighting, the Japanese had pushed so close to his lines that he called artillery fire down onto a position less than 50 yards from his own men. His hand did not shake when he called that order. He calculated. He knew the margin. He knew what would happen if he did not call it, and he knew what might happen if he did. He called it. The shells landed where he said they would. The attack broke. Not all at once. Not cleanly. The fighting continued through the night, in the rain and the dark, with the Marine line bending here and there under pressure but never breaking. Each wave that came forward was met with the same disciplined fire, the same prearranged artillery, the same machine gun positions that had been set up so carefully the day before. At 2 in the morning, a second Japanese battalion attempted a separate attack on a different section of the line. That attack was also stopped. At 3 in the morning, the main assault had failed. At 5 in the morning, as the rain began to thin and the sky in the east turned from black to dark gray, the Sendai Division's primary attack column had been destroyed as a fighting force. Dawn came slowly over Guadalcanal. The Marines came out of their holes carefully, rifles ready, moving through the early light. The ground in front of their wire was not something that any of them forgot for the rest of their lives. More than 900 Japanese soldiers had been killed in the attack. The casualties among Puller's 700 men were fewer than 70. The ratio told you something about the plan. More than that, it told you something about the discipline required to execute it. 700 sick, tired, hungry men had held themselves still in the dark while a force 3 times their size walked toward them. They had not fired early. They had not panicked. They had trusted their colonel and trusted each other and held the line. In the pockets of some of the soldiers on the ground, there were small flags. Japanese flags, folded neatly, never used. Puller walked his line in the gray morning. He stopped to speak to his company commanders. He checked ammunition counts. He asked about the wounded. He wrote his after-action report in the flat, precise language that military reports require. He did not make a speech. He did not raise his voice. He simply moved through his men the same way he had walked the line the evening before, looking at the ground, thinking about what would come next. Because something would come next. The Sendai Division tried again the following night. A second major assault, reorganized after the devastation of the first, came forward in the dark. Puller's line held again. The pattern of the first night repeated itself: disciplined fire, preset artillery, machine guns positioned to deny the open ground. By the morning of October 26, the Japanese offensive against Henderson Field was finished. The Sendai Division, which had entered the jungle confident of victory, limped back through the trees with a fraction of its original strength. Its regimental commanders filed reports to Tokyo that were difficult to write. The reports said that the Marine defenses had been far stronger than expected. That the Americans had fought with unusual discipline. That the ground had not been favorable. None of those reports mentioned the flags. Henderson Field did not fall that night. It did not fall at all. The Marines held it through October, through November, through the long brutal months that followed, until finally the situation on Guadalcanal shifted and Japanese forces were pulled off the island. The airfield they had built and lost and tried so hard to take back remained in American hands, and the aircraft that flew from it played a significant role in what happened next in the Pacific. History books record the battle for Henderson Field as a tactical victory. The numbers are cited. The casualty figures are compared. Puller's 4th Navy Cross is noted. But numbers do not fully explain what happened on the night of October 24, 1942. What happened was something quieter than numbers. 700 men lay in the dark and listened to an army coming for them through the rain. They felt the ground shake when that army moved. They heard sounds that told them exactly how close the enemy was. Every instinct a person has in that situation says the same thing. Move. Fire. Do something. Those 700 men did not move. They breathed. They waited. They trusted the plan, and they trusted the men who made it, and they held their positions in the mud and the rain until the moment came. That is the part the numbers do not capture. The discipline in the silence. The courage of holding still. The understanding that sometimes the most powerful thing a soldier can do is exactly nothing, until the moment when everything must be done at once. Puller understood this. He had walked the ground, read the terrain, and built a plan around the one advantage his smaller force possessed: the enemy did not know where the killing ground began. So he showed them. He let them walk into it. And then he closed the door. There is a detail that historians mention briefly and then move past. On the morning after the battle, when Marines were moving carefully across the ground in front of their wire, they found among the fallen soldiers some items that had been carried into battle with care. Personal things. Photographs. Letters. And those small, neatly folded flags. The flags were never planted on Henderson Field. The airfield stood. The Marines held it. The war in the Pacific continued for nearly 3 more years, grinding and enormous, and when it finally ended, the story of one night on Guadalcanal had already been folded into the larger history of that conflict, one battle among hundreds. But the men who were there never forgot it. They remembered the rain. They remembered the darkness. They remembered lying in their holes and feeling the ground shake and hearing the sounds of an advancing army and choosing, every one of them, not to fire until the order came. They remembered Puller walking the line in the morning, checking on his men, asking about the wounded, moving through the gray light without ceremony. They remembered that when the plan worked, the men who made the plan did not celebrate. He looked at the ground. He thought about the next night. He made sure his men were ready. That is the whole story, or as much of it as can be held in words. A piece of flat ground near a river on an island in the South Pacific. A plan built on patience. 700 men who held their nerve in the dark. And 900 soldiers who walked into the open carrying flags they never got to use.